The ultimatum landed like frost on glass: kneel, or be rendered harmless. Earth answered with a power cut. Across the quantum relay, the vigilant order saw their own reflection, then nothing at all. In that silence, hollow asteroids breathed, foundries woke, and the first stones of a very old play rolled toward a brand new empire. The Order's herald ship broadcast its last demand over the Pacific night: surrender of kinetics, surrender of autonomy, surrender of history. On the charts aboard TDF Skymero, Commander Maya Rios traced the timing marks like sutures, how the relay chimed every 13 seconds, how their translator softened the steel of the words. She didn't answer. She killed the lights. Protocol blackout, fleet-wide, Maya said. Phones off, eyes on the sky. Across cislunar space, 1,000 civilian transponders winked out of existence. Commuter ferries became nameless silhouettes. Weathersats ghosted into the background noise. The Order had expected panic and pleas. Instead, they got quiet. Far away, the old miners in the Jovian Trojans felt their decks hum as Foundry 6, a hollow rock that stored more inertia than prudence, spooled its mass drivers to an ancient, industrial rhythm. The Order called energy civilized. Humans called gravity honest. Admiral Ezra Cade's face appeared on Skymero's dim bridge, lit by a single console. They want a chorus, he said. Give them percussion. A flash blossomed out by L4, where a cluster of cargo canisters, once dumb nickel, unfolded vanes and gyros. On Maya's scope, they were just pebbles with attitude, each one divinely simple: tungsten core, Savo shroud, guidance wafer that knew only vectors and spite. She thought of Midway's sandbag decoys, of Warsaw's illegal transmitters, of Navajo words braided into fire. Good tricks age slowly. Targets, said her gunnery chief. Any shield that believes itself scripture, Maya replied. The Vigilant Order's pickets formed a jeweled wall, hexagonal flicker, prismatic sheen. To their doctrine, anything worth stopping was light. The first salvo came in staggered arcs, long trail physics harvesting every scrap of delta V from the machinery of mining. The canisters did not blaze. They did not sing. They arrived. When the slugs struck the leading cruiser's curtain, the field wrapped itself in heroic mathematics, converting momentum to heat and light, confident in its curriculum. But the slugs were not energy, they were insistence. The curtain hissed, flexed, then failed with a sound no microphone could capture. The tungsten went on, still holding the opinion it had been launched with. On the Order flagship votive, envoys chewed the air and swapped harmonics, sliding their shields from sapphire to amber to verdant. The impacts did not care. They were terminal arguments. Plates buckled. Radiators snapped. Warning icons learned the color of confession. Broadcast, asked comms. Maya shook her head. Not yet. She watched one of their own decoy tugs spew chaff in a pattern that wasn't there, a hole cut in noise, an arrow at a relay. The Order's relay web was clean as an architect's conscience, but architectures hid assumptions. Humans loved assumptions. A courier corvette dove to rescue the faltering cruiser, shields tight, thrusters hot. That was their other religion, reciprocity inside the wall. Skymero's grapples fired with a bodybuilder's joy. The coils sang. the corvette's shield took the first iron kiss and tried to explain it away. The second shot translated across engineering. The third found kindness in the docking ring. Metal met metal, ugly and intimate. Boarding team, go, Maya said. They went like locksmiths, not pirates. The order crew fought with all the grace of academy drills and none of the leverage of surprise. In 2 minutes, the bridge was a museum exhibit, panel lights still blinking, a nerve center without a nervous system. Lieutenant Raman pulled data crystals with gloved fingers and handed them down the chain like bread. On an external cam, Maya saw the damaged cruiser roll, bleeding photons, choosing between fire and flight. She thought briefly about proportionality and the ethics lectures she'd half hated and never forgotten. Tag the cruiser for rescue, she said. Leave them a corridor. We're not making martyrs tonight. Cade's voice again, softer, we make narratives. Different thing. He was right. Psyops rode on rails, too. Relay map. Maya asked Raman. Live in 60, came the reply, breathless and smug. They treat their quantum as gospel. We can hum along. On Skymero's main screen, the galaxy's neat arteries appeared, trade lanes and patrol loops, legal and less so, stitched with time. In temples and palaces, someone far away would soon notice that the quiet they'd planned for Earth had produced a choir they did not write. Maya let herself breathe. Blackout wasn't fear, it was choice. When you keep your own counsel, you decide what enters. Outside, Foundry 6 cycled again, and again, each strike a sentence punctuated by a crater. She had no illusions, kinetics were messy in ways lasers weren't. But she'd seen a surgeon's hands shake more over a lie than a wound. Message to the envoy, she said at last. One line. Comms nodded. Ready. Maya looked at the dead relay camera, at their reflection in the cold. You may keep your light, she said. We'll keep our mess. The line went out on a tight beam. Somewhere, a doctrine cracked, quietly. By morning, the relay net hummed a different tune. Where the order expected pleading manifests and surrender codes, they found weather reports wind over Dakar, a barometric dip near Christchurch stitched into carrier waves that refused decryption. The quiet choir, a skunk works of translators, poets, and bored hams recruited from 1,000 rooftops, had braided the oldest mortal stubbornness into quantum hygiene. You could jam a channel. You could not jam a culture. Maya rode the Skymero in among ore tugs wearing civilian paint and military intent. No hero shots, she told the camera crews they didn't have. If nobody notices we were here, we did it right. Target 1 was logistics, a crescent of depot ships anchored at the edge of the FIA corridor, where traffic pinched to a pretty bottleneck. The order would call it secure because their shields made maps beautiful. Skymero called it edible. They came in on a belt of gravel, thrusters flitting in polite puffs, coil sleeping, hull cold enough to fool a thermometer with trust issues. Decoy pallets ready, Raman said. The pallets were the oldest kind of lie, familiar, comfortable, covered in the equivalent of shipping stickers. Inside lay ferromagnetic lace and coins of smart iron, each pattern a sentence the shields didn't have a word for. When the pallets drifted close, the depot commander sent a boarding drone to nudge them aside. The drone pushed, felt the pattern, and told the shield to relax in exactly the wrong place. Foundry 6's cousin, Foundry 9, had been practicing a new drum beat, short stroke snaps, less opera, more jazz. The slugs arrived not as singular convicts but as a murmuration, each one willing to be ordinary, all of them determined to be statistical destiny. The depot flinched. 3 fuel tanks coughed plasma into a sunrise nobody had ordered. Sirens stitched the moment shut. "Broadcast now," comms asked again. "Now," Maya said, and the choir sang not triumph but truth. Clips of the battle near Earth showed streaks puncturing Pride, then the corridor, then the faces of the rescued Order Corvette crew drinking water under human lights. No jeers. No trophies. Just context, shields, assumptions, outcomes, rescue corridors left open by people who didn't need to. "Label it Doctrine Update," Maya said. "Tag every captain's inbox from here to their capital." An hour later, Skymero rendezvoused with a refugee barge full of Cathari amphibious, translucent-boned, voices like chimes underwater. The Order classified the Cathari as recalcitrant labor. They called themselves neighbors. The barge had burned its last chemical thruster praying for anybody but pirates. When Skymero's hull shadow fell over them, the Cathari sang a note that stripped varnish from souls. "Dock them," Maya ordered. "Food first, bureaucracy after." On the flight deck, Admiral Cade supervised a pallet refit cargo bays turning into creches in under 10 minutes. A veil scribe in borrowed overalls watched the process with eyes that seemed to count possibilities. "You are not like their hollows," she said to Maya, voice band passed through a translator that also made coffee. "Your war smells of copper and bread." "Bread matters," Maya said. "People who eat together make better choices about who to shoot." The choir seeded the Cathari's testimony across the net, the sound a child makes when lifted out of a cracked tank, the click of a ration tin, the dumb human joke that lands anyway. The Order great system of light and lattice had never learned to metabolize amateur data. Their truth came curated, lacquered. The choir preferred fingerprints. They moved again, innards soft with refugees and secrets. Target 2 was a quantum relay perched like a jeweled mantis over the Anank drift. The plan was indecently simple: let it think it was safe, let it think it was alone, then teach it a new key. Raman ran a program written half in Python, half in a dialect that used puns as delimiters. The relay blinked confusion, then hospitality. "Back doors open," he said. "Don't slam it," Maya said. "We'll be living here." Inside the Order's message traffic, they found what you always find inside empires: grocery lists next to manifestos, pay stubs next to prayers. They read the doctrine updates being drafted in panic: new harmonics, thicker curtains, better rhetoric. They also read dispatches about an inspection tour of Anvil Gate, the choke at the heart of a spiral arm. If you wanted to build a kill box, you would choose Anvil Gate. The Order had chosen it for display. "Send it to Cade," Maya said. "And to Qureshi." Dr. Samir Qureshi had been sleeping 3 hours a night and calling it self-care. He believed rails were honest and space was pliable. "Give him a coil," a prism, and permission to break something, and he'd thread trajectories through needles that didn't exist yet. When he answered, "Hair at quark angles," he said, "If you can hold them at the gate for 6 minutes, I can move a slug sideways." Sideways? Maya repeated, charmed and horrified. "Only a little," Samir admitted. "A stutter 3-4 ship lengths mid-flight. Enough to make a shield's math cry." "Do it," Maya said. "Bring a bucket for the tears." The choir timed their next broadcast to the lull that swallows a bruise. The message was plain text over old-school carrier: "A doctrine failed. Here are the names we saved. Here is the room we left for you to leave. Here is the next place you shouldn't be. Empires survive lies. They have worse trouble with ordinary, steady truth." By the time the order arrived at Anvil Gate to demonstrate control, the gate was already a stage. Anvil Gate was beautiful in the way harbors are beautiful, geometry pretending to be mercy. 3 mast pylons held the corridor like chopsticks holding a star. Officially, the gate existed to smooth traffic and prevent collisions. Unofficially, it existed to remind ships who set the table. Skymero slid into the gravel halo and cut her heat to monastery levels. Foundry 9's cousins nested in the shadow of pylon bases, throwing rocks with the patience of geology. "Shield harmonics updated," Raman said, pulling spectral rainbows apart with a cat's delight. The Order had learned a new song. Good for them. "Stutter port ready?" Maya asked. Samir Qureshi appeared on a corner screen, hands moving in air full of equations. Behind him, a jury-rigged lattice blinked like a nervous constellation, human coils cross-stitched with scavenged alien crystals, wrapped in ceramic that used to be a coffee mug. "We can nudge a slug laterally at T-2 seconds, he said. "Maybe 3. It will cost us a capacitor and your tolerance for novelty." "I have novelty to spare," Maya said. "Make it weird." The Order's inspection flotilla arrived in diamond formation, banners sharp, PR crews hungry. Their doctrine video would show efficiency, precision, the comfort of returning to the scheduled program. Maya let them pose. Then she lit the first pallet, not a killing blow, just a question mark. The gate's central pylon flexed its field and swallowed the question as trained. Cameras caught success. The Order Admiral cued his narrator. The second volley drew an exclamation. The third, a parenthesis, 2 slugs curving toward different targets, then, at Samir's whispered count, sidestepping like dancers to strike twin shield seams that thought they were somewhere else. The math broke posture. The field staggered. Again, Maya said, and the foundries obliged. Stutter porting was not teleportation, it was rudeness, a refusal to remain in a single frame. Shields wrote essays to explain light. Slugs showed up unannounced to talk about mass. "Boarding teams to Pylon 3, Maya ordered. Non-lethal preferred. We want their manuals, not their martyrs." They went in on grapples and gall, cutting into maintenance trunks, surfing pressure equalizations like urban kids on summer rails. The Order techs were brave and surprised, bad combination. A Veil scribe on Maya's team murmured, "They designed this for elegance. You cannot guard every seam when your pride is curvature." "Poetry on your own time," Raman said, but softly. In the control hub, Maya found the kill switch under glass. She also found the redundancy under hubris. Empires buried backups where their architects took private bows. They shut down the pylon field not with force but with etiquette, a handshake in the right dialect, a checksum signed with a font the order had deprecated for being unfashionable. Somewhere, a standards committee screamed. Civilians? Maya asked. Freighter lane inbound, came traffic. 4 civilian hulls, 1 flagged for medical. There it was, the dilemma that separates hunters from butchers. An easy collapse of the gate would turn the corridor into shrapnel and headlines. A careful closure would bleed their own advantage to save strangers who would not know whom to thank. Hold the collapse, Maya said. Put our hull between debris and the medship. Kate came up on Fleet Link. You'll take a hit. I've taken worse for less, she said, and meant it. Skymero rolled, presenting fat armor to a spray of unfortunate metal. Impacts thudded into her plates with the sonorous honesty of penance. Systems groaned, a panel showered harmless sparks like stagecraft. Out the port side window, the medship slid through the gate, tiny and stubborn and committed to tomorrow. Pylon 3 under control, boarding reported. We've got their logs. We've also got a coffee machine I think I love. Bring it, Maya said. War runs on beans. Samir whispered counts and slid a final slug sideways into the Admiral's proudest curtain. The flotilla's formation broke like ice on a river's first loud day. Some ran, some postured, some called home. The choir captured it all and layered it over footage of Ketheri kids coloring on Skymero's deck with grease pencils. Doctrine fails at scale. Mercy scales faster than fear if you feed it. Message, comms asked. 2. Maya said. To the order, the gate is now a toll-free zone. To the arm who can hear but cannot answer, we are hiring. That last line wasn't theater. The order wasn't a monolith, empires never are. Inside its geometries lived people with rent and grief. Maya had a list, and a budget, and a conviction that loyalty is a function of dignity offered. The first reply came from an engineer named Havel whose hobby was restoring banned folk instruments. He sent schematics and a song. Both were useful. The gate belonged to gravity again by dusk. Ships moved like they had before doctrine, listening to each other with lantern light and hand signals. Skymero hung off the pylon and exhaled. Somewhere in her hull, a bearing sang the high note that says soon. Qureshi stared at his lattice like a man who had tasted a new word. How far can you push it? Maya asked. Farther, he said. Sideways is only the beginning. She felt the sky lean toward later. For now, rails and honesty would do. They gathered in a warehouse that pretended to be a museum, crates of confiscated history stacked under banners that had survived previous empires by learning to fold. Ketheri elders in algae green shawls, veil scribes with their counting beads, 3 human counselors, one of whom President Lin Tran carried the tired joy of people who measure victories in days of uninterrupted sleep. Admiral Cade took the corner with the bad sight line because he refused to let anyone else guard it. Maya brought coffee and the gate's stolen manuals. We're not here to found a flag, Lin said, voice low and certain. We're here to found a habit. On the wall, the choir projected two images, the Order's shimmering doctrinal shield, and a sketch of Qureshi's displacement lattice. Samir stood with chalk on his fingers like a schoolteacher who knows the trick will work when the bell rings. "We can't move ships," he said. "Yet. But we can remove things, move incoming ordnance a few ship lengths away, or reposition a slug mid-flight. It's a valve, not a door." "Lanterns," Maya said, surprising herself. "Not walls. Light you carry that makes paths." Lin nodded. "We'll call them lantern shields. We make them public open designs, verifiable builds, minimal parts that small yards can machine. Defense that doesn't require a throne." "Open?" Cade asked. His tone held every scar he'd acquired, earning the right to ask. "Open," Lin repeated. "If we turn defense into a license, we'll become the thing we're fighting. We will control use, not knowledge." The Veil Scribe clicked her beads. "Ethic of proportionality," she said. "Doctrine of pursuit confined to those who first aggress." Maya thought of the med ship sliding through shrapnel, of the Order engineer's song. She said, "We hunt hunters. We leave corridors. We film everything." Samir cleared his throat. "There is one more piece. Sideways is easy compared to short step forward. A true jump is beyond us. But we can stutter a person across a bulkhead in an emergency. 1 meter. 10. That might turn a boarding action from slaughter to conversation." Silence held the room a breath. "Consent locked?" Lin asked. "Biometric, mutual," Samir said quickly. "Refusal defaults to no. Every log is auditable. We make abuse boringly hard." "Then it's a rescue tool," Lin said. "Not a weapon. Put it in the compact." They wrote it there, not on vellum but in code and camera and custom. The lantern compact read like a kitchen's rules: who cooks, who cleans, who gets the first bowl. Its tenets. Kinetics before lasers when shields are tyrants' theology. Displacement before destruction when civilians are near. Pursuit is moral when flight endangers others, cease when corridors open. All comms public unless secrecy saves a vulnerable life. Open designs for defense, closed doors for cruelty. The Order's reply arrived on cue, a threat wrapped in etiquette. Their message refused to say fear, it said stability. It listed planets like debts and peoples like errors to be corrected. It promised a demonstration at the shipyard they called Seraphim, where shields had names and careers and committees. Cade rolled a map across the table. Seraphim sat at the end of a spoke, fed by 3 lanes, guarded by story and habit. "We cut their myth here," he said. "We convert it into welders and unions." "Can lanterns stand up to their heavy batteries?" someone asked. "Not yet," Samir admitted. "But lanterns can move the batteries' tantrums into emptiness. We'll carry truth in our pockets and corridors in our pockets and never make a wall we can't walk away from." Maya felt the future lean in again, the way a train does when it decides to arrive. She pictured Seraphim stripped of its adjectives, a yard where Ketheri stevedores and Veil accountants negotiated over coffee while human apprentices learned to file edges without cutting fingers. She pictured order cadets stepping into a union hall because the rent was due and the work was honest. "Psyops package," the choir lead asked. "Lead with a question," Maya said. "Ask them who taught them that light was the only language." Lynn looked at the room like a captain checks anchors. "We go," she said. "We go loud with truth and quiet with tools. We carry lanterns. We leave doors." Outside, Foundry 6 and 9 rolled their drums, the comfortable racket of a species that built ships in barns and symphonies in garages. Skymero's plates creaked like a house before a party. Ramen taught the coffee machine to accept Vale beans because victory tastes better when everyone recognizes the flavor. Qureshi tightened a bolt on a lattice that wanted to be a door because patience is part of courage. At Anvil Gate, traffic moved without supervision, like a city after a storm when neighbors exit with brooms. A med ship headed for somewhere better. An order courier drifted in the lee of a freighter, thinking about the names on a list and a song that made the math cry. The lantern compact went out over every channel the choir could steal. Somewhere deep in the order's core, a statistician looked up from a dashboard and felt, without being able to graph it, the moment an empire begins to lose a war not on a field, but in a habit of mind. They had rails. Later, they'd have doors. For now, lanterns would do. They met again, this time not in a warehouse but in a decommissioned dry dock whose walls still remembered tide marks and torch heat. Lanterns, real ones, warm and ridiculous, hung between cranes. The Ketheri elders brought salt bread and stories. The Vale scribes brought contracts braided with folklore clauses. Havel, the order engineer with a hobby of outlaw instruments, tuned a stringed thing that sounded like a bridge settling at night. President Lin Tran opened with the sentence good leaders choose when everyone is tired. Tell me what can go wrong. Everything, Admiral Cade said, amiable as a hammer. He pointed at the map of space someone had painted on a shipping container. Red circles marked places where the order's rebuttal had already nibbled back, new shield harmonics stiffening, patrols bunching around optics. We are hunters, yes. But hunters have rules, no shots into the village, no snare where children walk. Proportionality, the Vale scribe said, clicking her beads. Pursuit allowed when a fleeing threat continues to threaten. Cease when a corridor opens. Maya Rios tasted coffee that had been brewed on a welder's break and said, corridors aren't metaphors. We leave them on purpose. She thought of the med ship sliding through the Anvil Gate. She could still hear the shrapnel scolding Skymero's plates. Samir Qureshi laid a schematic on the table, a flattened flower of coils and alien crystals, lantern shield MKI with annotations in 3 alphabets and a 4th that was mostly jokes. It's not a wall, he reminded everyone. It's a valve. It short steps swarms and shells away from faces, and it lets light and conversation through. Open source plans, small yard machinable, check some in the open. If someone closes it around a population, the whole galaxy will see the commit. Havel looked up from his strings. And if the order steals it? They will, Lin said. We plan for the day our tools reach hands we do not control. That's why we write the habit now. The quiet choir, whose daytime jobs included traffic management and child care, had spent the week running teach-ins on ships and stations. They put slides up in cafeterias, clips of rescue corridors, captions in 300 dialects, a Q&A where a Cathari grandmother asked if a lantern could be baked into a kitchen stove for emergencies and Samir said yes, then came back the next day with a prototype that turned grease fires into harmless steam and applause. Movements survive when they live in kitchens. Consent locks. Lynn asks Samir. Every personal short step requires 2 yes, he said. No override. Logs public, with redactions only for witness safety voted by a mixed board. If that slows us down in a corridor, so be it. Slow is good when it keeps us human, Maya said, and felt the room breathe out. They formalized the wideness by naming it. Not a flag. A charter. The Liberation Alliance signed with voices and video and a Cathari shell stamp that left a pretty spiral on the corner of every page. Tenets repeated the compact and added a few that had nothing to do with physics and everything to do with tomorrow. Pay the dockers first, newsrooms stay funded, kids sleep under the quiet side of the ship. Then they tested the personal short step in the most boring way possible, a drill. A veil loader played the role of a pinned worker beneath a toppled crate. Samir's lattice hummed, the loader said yes, Maya said yes, the world hiccuped and the loader blinked on the other side of the hazard, laughing the shaky laugh people make when a story could have gone another way. The room clapped the polite clap of relief. Every revolution needs paperwork and drills. The choir streamed it, along with something else, a round table on Just Pursuit, with a civil rights historian whose grandparents organized boycotts that walked the length of a city, a Cathari ethicist who kept quoting tide charts, and a shipfitter who had seen too many necessary accidents on order docks. They spoke about restraint as skill, not weakness. They spoke about Midway's deception nets and Dunkirk's little boats and the way ordinary logistics can redeem strategy when strategy forgets to feed people. Allies came because someone had finally written down a way to fight that did not require becoming a prettier tyrant. The Cathari pledged ships with bellies and doctors. The Veil pledged ledgers that caught theft before it earned a poem. A dozen little peoples pledged listening posts, mended mass drivers, and the sort of patience you learn in mines and nurseries. The first real test of the charter came sooner than anyone wished. An order patrol took hostages at a way station to bait Skymero into a clean PR kill. Maya arrived to find hunger and fear and a captain behind a shield who clearly believed his training films. Lantern MKI fluttered, caught the first volley of non-lethals, and slid them sideways into an empty bay where they clattered like rain. Maya opened a corridor with her own hull and called the hostages through by name, because the choir had taught her their names on the way in. The order captain hesitated. Doctrine said hold. Habit said measure. He lowered his weapon halfway. Maya did not take the shot. She took the breath. Lantern rule, she said over open channel. We leave you a door. Walk out of this story. He did. Not because she scared him, but because she made staying seem small. By dusk, the dry dock had a new sign welded over its door. No heraldry, just 3 words that tasted like a vow, carry the light. They were not done with rails. They were not done with running. But they had written terms for the hunt, and sometimes writing is the whole war. Seraphim shipwork sat at the end of a spoke like a chandelier in a locked room shimmering, civilized, and built on the sort of bookkeeping that invents oblivions. The Order used it to mint proof that shields were destiny, training tours strode catwalks, holocams kissed angles, cadets learned to speak about stability without ever saying stagnation. Camera angles first, the choir said. Then coils. They came in 3 layers deep, a convoy of ore haulers with tags in order and coffee stains on their manifests, a swarm of maintenance drones with exactly the right number of bolts missing, and Skymarrow, cold and quiet and stowed where dignified ships never looked. Foundry cousins seeded the approach with debris nothing would notice until it mattered. Havel played a tune on the cargo net and called it calibration. Seraphim's outer curtains sang with new harmonics amber over violet, the latest committee's opinion. Cade watched their churn and smiled the way sailors smile at storms they have met before. Layered pride, he said. Aim for the seams where jurisdictions disagree. Samir's plan was impolite and meticulous. It stacked stutter windows like beads, each time to nudge a slug a handspan sideways 30 times in flight, threading it through vents designed by architects who had never considered that tungsten might attend faculty meetings. The first chain cut a line of holes along a shield pylon's radiator, not enough to kill, just enough to make the field sweat. The second arrived inside a data trunk and convinced it politely to listen to a new supervisor with a friendly accent. Broadcast, Maya said, but not to gloat. The choir split the screen, on the left, the Order's training hollows of perfect shields, on the right, live footage of Skymarrow slugs showing up late to a geometry lecture with burritos and making everyone fall a little in love with bad manners. Boarding went in on soft solace and promises. Maya's teams wore bright patches that read rescue first because clarity saves minutes. Dockers met them with hands that knew tools and eyes that knew consequence. We are closing the yard, Maya told a forewoman whose hair was a biography. Not to starve you. To change the menu. The forewoman looked at the manuals Skymarrow had stolen from gate control and laughed once. Been cooking with the wrong book, she said. Show me the page with unions. The hardest room was the narrative theater, where the Order filmed its training myths. It had nicer lighting than any factory had a right to. The choir hijacked it and filmed something else, a Kathari welder teaching a Vale accountant to read stress in a beam by listening to it sing, Havel explaining how a chord becomes stronger when the middle voice insists, Maya reading the lantern tenets without apology. They called it How to Build Bright. They shoved it into every relay, every phone, every projector that had ever lied about Seraphim. Resistance came anyway. An Order cotter young, polished, perfectly edited tried to retake Pylon 2 with a speech and a schematic. Maya put her body between them and a row of dockers who would have died beautiful in somebody else's montage. You're brave, she told the cotter leader. Be useful instead. The leader's jaw worked like a machine that needed lubrication. You are thieves. Of what? Maya asked. Power? We're giving it away. Doctrine? We're publishing it with footnotes. They faltered on the line where pride meets employment. Cade gave them the old sailor's gift, a job. Here, he said, tossing a tablet like a float. Inventory your barricades. If you can count what you can't move, you can count what we can. By afternoon, Seraphim's hiss had changed. No more sizzle of PR. More clank of tools. Lantern MKI rigs bloomed on catwalks like honest flowers. The yard's crown jewel, a shield foundry stamped with serial numbers and shame, went dark under a quilt of tarps and signatures. Havel and the forewoman spun up new line codes. The Katheri sang a work song that made rivets set straight. The order sent a warning shot from a distant cruiser to remind everyone who wrote the syllabus. Samir slid its energy plume 3 ship lengths into emptiness. It arrived at nobody, like a rumor that finds no oxygen. The choir cut that shot into a reel called Stability, Meet Vacuum, and added captions about safety corridors and lunch breaks. Propaganda dies fastest when you make it boring. They renamed the yard Forge Bright because you should tell metal what you expect of it. The first thing it built was a crate workshop for lantern parts, cheap, verifiable, colored loud so nobody could pretend not to see them. The second was a daycare. Skymero sailed at dusk with her belly full of manuals, new allies, and 300 small problems that added up to civilization. The Order would not forgive the theft of a myth. Good. Myths make poor landlords. Rails remained honest. Doors would come later. Tonight, they had turned a chandelier into a kitchen, and kitchens change empires the way sieges never quite do. Forgiveness did not arrive. Oriole did. The Order's counter was a beam with pedigree, a continuous projector tuned by committees who drank light for breakfast. On paper, it ignored slugs by addressing only photons. In practice, it burned corridors into space and dignity into ash. They rolled it out near the Orifex climb, a set of switchbacks in gravity and habit where civilian lanes curled like rope. Skymero met it with lanterns strung like festival lights between tugs, each coil humming a slightly different key. Randomized seed, Samir said. If they learn one rhythm, 3 more will refuse to dance. Oriole wrote a line across the dark that instruments called elegant and everyone else called a problem. Lantern MKI did what it could. Short-stepped the beam's hottest teeth into emptiness, jittered geometry just enough to bleed coherence, turned a spear into a clumsy paintbrush. It wasn't enough. Civilians inbound, traffic called. 2 freighters, 1 school transport. Cade swore in a dialect dockers use when a crate starts to fall. We hold, he said, like sandbags say it to floods. Maya drew a lane with her own hull again, an old habit getting older. Skip shot, she told gunnery. 1 2 3. Samir, blink the windows on my count. Skip shot looked like luck when it worked. Slugs kissing micro stutters. Samir opened in the world, sidestepping left-right up to arrive at the projector's radiator in a rhythm the beam could not write over. The first found plate. The second found pipe. The third found the engineer's coffee. Somewhere inside Oriole's clean room, someone shouted a word banned from memos. The beam hesitated like a man realizing the argument isn't going to go the way he practiced. Lanterns bloomed harder, softer, then in an arrhythmic hum that made math amateurs and pros sweat equally. Qureshi deployed bloom nets. Drone boys seated with tiny displacement coils tuned to nap the vacuum just enough to shear coherence. The beam flared into a feathered curtain, pretty and less murderous. School transport through, traffic called, voice tight. Freighters stacked behind. Skymero took the brunt because ethics aren't only essays. Heat seethed through her plates, A console died with a sad pop. Raman caught a falling panel with his forearm and swore by saints and syntax. In engineering, a kid wired yesterday faced an overheating coil and remembered a training video where Musa from the Veil counted to 7 before cutting the blue wire. The kid counted to 8 and pulled the green. The coil sighed and lived. Return fire, Gunnery asked, blood up. Name your target first, Maya said. Then tell me what else will die. Gunnery choked on the second part. That was the point. The order shifted tactics, flashing harmonics faster than the choir could write captions. Oriole looked at a lantern and found nothing there because Samir had moved the nothing. I need 30 seconds and everyone's doubt, he said. You've got doubt, Cade said. Make it sing. They pivoted to flicker wall lanterns chained in nonsense patterns that only looked random because most of the sense was sad history. Each flicker encoded a memory, a bus boycott's timetable, a clandestine radio's call sign, a list of names you say before sleep. The wall didn't try to block, it misdirected need. The beam chased ghosts and chewed gaps in its own pride. Maya saw a hole open in the projector's cooling cone and threw 3 slugs, then told the third to arrive where the second had been and the second to arrive where the first had been, because sometimes you lie to your own ammunition to teach a beam humility. Metal obeyed. The projector's luminance sagged like a boast near closing time. Civilians clear, traffic said, soft with relief. Then we stop writing our names on this, Maya replied. Punch a corridor for their retreat. They did, and the order, stubborn and trained and human in all the ways that matter when you've built a theology out of physics, took it. Oriole dwindled into a bright line that receded like a lesson finally read to the end. Skymero drifted, smoking in the places ships smoke, stress gauges chirping, a bulkhead complaining, a coffee machine blinking 12 o'clock forever. Raman wrapped his forearm and muttered about paperwork. The kid from engineering cried in a corner for exactly 30 seconds, then went back to checking coils with the ruthless compassion of apprentices. Maya sat with her back against a warm plate and let the heat tell her the bill. Victory had a price. So did decency. The ledger would balance when a school transport arrived somewhere ordinary and children asked for snacks. Samir leaned on a rail, eyes still full of equations. Lantern V2 can't stop a star, he said. But it can keep a life from metastasizing. Good, Maya said. Because the next thing is a meeting. What kind? The dangerous kind, she said. The kind with chairs. They chose neutral ground that wasn't, Pale Harbor, a station built by a species that had outlived 3 empires by pretending to love tea and actually loving leverage. The order sent a counselor in robes with a sleeve of commendations. The Alliance sent Lin, Cade, Maya, Samir, the Veil scribe, a Ketheri elder with tide-worn eyes, and Havel with his instrument because sometimes you need a cord to move a room. The order opened with a familiar hymn. Stability. Traditions. Ungoverned innovation as contagion. Lin listened like a carpenter measuring an old house for true. When the counselor finished, she lifted a single page and read the first 10 lines of the Lantern Compact, then slid the page across the table. We are not asking permission to exist, she said. We're inviting you to exist differently. Your lanterns undermine every doctrine of control, the counselor said, which was true. They undermine cruelty, the Ketheri elder replied, which was truer. Samir set a lantern MKI on the table. No theatrics, just a valve in a pretty dress. Open source, he said. Check some here. Any yard can make one. Any tyrant can make one, too. The difference will be in how publicly they deploy it. We have more cameras than you have secrets. Maya put a stack of names beside the device, the rescued from Gate, the dockers from Seraphim, the kids from the school transport. We hunt hunters, she said. When you stop hunting, we stop. When you leave corridors, we stop. When you stop filming war like it's a commercial, we stop filming you. The counselor smiled the smile of a man who has not yet realized that negotiation is a kind of math where 0 isn't the only interesting number. And if we refuse? Cade's answer was not a threat. It was logistics. He laid down route maps showing how lanterns turned choke points into parks. He slid repair schedules for ships that would never again depend on permission to travel. He showed Seraphim's new payroll and the number of lunches eaten in peace that week. You can refuse, he said. But you will be late to your own economy. Havel played a chord and told a short story about a band melody that returned as a lullaby no one could outlaw because babies liked it. He did not look at the counselor when he said, "Lullabies win wars you don't see coming." The order asked their questions. Could lanterns be weaponized? Yes, like knives can cut bread or throats. What keeps you from becoming the thing you preach against? Paperwork, cameras, and the exhausting habit of telling the truth in rooms that prefer poetry. What do you want? Lynn answered that one. Not your capitulation, she said. Your participation. A lantern accord. You keep your fleets. You open your corridors. You adopt the rules of pursuit we wrote with people who have been pursued. You publish your budgets. You license Oriole as a firework, not a spear. In return, you receive the plans, the training, and the dull miracle of watching fewer mothers memorize shelter routes. You're holding the galaxy hostage with benevolence, the counselor said, tired and a little afraid. No, Maya said. We're holding it accountable with habits. The room balanced on a history's edge. Empires don't surrender, they leak. Pale Harbor tasted salt and coffee and something like a future. The counselor looked at the lantern device and saw not a weapon, but a valve he could neither sanctify nor suppress without being seen. He looked at the names and realized they were receipts. Conditional, he said at last, because even wisdom wears armor. We accept the accord under observation. Trial corridors at agreed lanes. Joint boards. No lanterns on our palace decks. Lynn did not gloat, she initialed. Corridors first, she agreed. Palace decks later, when you forget you were afraid. The choir didn't stream the signatures. They streamed what happened after, the first freighters passing through a corridor under a lantern bloom while an order patrol watched and didn't shoot, a union meeting at Forge Bright where the adjective Rs made new muscles in old faces, a schoolroom where a kid drew a ship with rails and little halos and said, doors later, like it was math homework. Skymero returned to Anvil Gate for no reason except to listen. Traffic moved like cities after storms, careful, generous. Raman's forearm healed into a better story. The kid from engineering learned to trust the eighth count. Samir stood at a viewport with Maya and watched a microlattice flicker in a lab 2 decks down. Sideways, he said, still tasting it. Then short step. Then maybe, doors. Later, Maya said, and didn't make it a scold. The future arrives fast, but it's only useful if the present survives it. Cade lit a lantern, an actual one, oil and wick, and set it in the mess where people keep their promises. Lynn wrote letters to stations that still spoke the old hymn and said, "Come cook." The Veil scribe filed paperwork so boring it made tyranny impossible in 20 small ways. The Ketheri elder taught a class on tide charts and told jokes that required the patience of stone. Earth slept less afraid. The Order learned to pronounce enough. The galaxy did not kneel, it leaned toward habits that carry light, toward rails that tell the truth, toward doors that would open when everyone was ready to walk through them together. They had kept their mass. Now they were learning to carry their doors.